to the first two verses. But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the older men be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith, in love, in patience. Please be seated.
I hope it is that you will grab a Bible and turn that to Titus chapter 2. We're going to make our way that way here momentarily. I hope it is that perhaps you have a handout that looks very much similar to this one. If not, they are more than likely beside that awfully realistic looking palm tree there in the back. If you don't have one now, get one a little later. We've been studying through the books of the Bible and how they fit together and how you can see the blood of Jesus the Christ dripping off of every single page. There has been a transition from the Old Testament, as the Old Testament would hearken us to look forward to His coming, to the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that would remind us that He was here. And from Acts through the book of Revelation, the theme running there is not only is He coming back, but as His people, we ought to be doing something. And so as you and I look through these books, we find those two major themes coming to life. What you and I will read here on our little handout is the key words here are good works. That one phrase is used about 7 times in a letter that only has 3 chapters. The key phrase is, be ready unto every good work, and because I get to assign what I think key chapters are, I think it's chapter 2. The topic of this letter is salvation is for those who are sound in faith, pure in life, and zealous of good works. In this letter, Paul gives a very distinctive pattern of the local church. As a matter of fact, in chapter 1, what we see is that they've got some things missing. The eldership, those that would be in control of that local congregation, those who were making sure that the sheep are being fed the right way, they're just not there. And Paul would say it's high time that they get there. He would say, and by those phrases, he would say it's time to set things in order. The human penman was Paul, and it was probably written about 66 A.D. This book was written quickly after 1 Timothy, while Paul was either in Macedonia or Corinth. Titus' field of labor was a small island in the Mediterranean Sea called Crete. It's a great place. You should go there, where he proved himself to be a gifted preacher of the gospel. Crete's a large island in the Mediterranean Sea, south of the Aegean Sea. The Cretians were known as a group of mean folks. I don't even know how to say that the right way. They were very concerned about self. You'll find in chapter 1 that they hearken to whatever their physical desires are. Paul would call them their belly. Their God would be their belly. Paul wrote this book to edify Titus to the work that he left him to complete. And it is the point that sometimes when you are all alone on an island, you feel like you're all alone. And so Paul is saying, keep going, man, keep going. This book, like 1 Timothy, deals with the establishment of the correct leadership in a local congregation. In this letter, we find the command of the elder Christians to teach the younger Christians, like in chapter 2. Keys of life like love, faithfulness, family, and responsibility, just to mention a few. God echoes the same exhortation to Titus that he gave to Timothy. Let no man despise thee. That's Titus 2:15. Paul was the only writer of the New Testament who quoted heathen writers. He will mention that in the first chapter. He'll say, your people say, and then quote them. When you and I look at chapter 2, we probably get bogged down with the idea of the older teaching the younger, and here's that responsibility, and here's what you're supposed to teach them. But I think in chapter 2, even though that takes a majority of the chapter, I think the overlying theme of the chapter is found from verse 11 through verse 14. And it revolves around the grace of God, not necessarily the teaching styles and skills of other people. Let's look at verse number 11 through 14. The saving grace of God has been revealed to all people, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live sensibly, uprightly, and reverently in this present world, looking for the blessed hope and the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. He gave himself for us, that he might set us free from all sin and purify for himself a people belonging to him, zealous of good works. In chapter 2, verse 11 through 14, I want you to see three things, and then that will be yours. I want you to see liberty, I want you to see leaving, and I want you to see looking. Okay? Chapter 2, verse 11, liberty. The saving grace of God has been revealed to all people. There's a liberty God has revealed to us. Here in chapter 2, verse 11, it's called the saving grace of God. It's a liberty. You and I do not have to stay where we are. We have the ability to choose something different. We have the ability to choose something better. Now, if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we don't have the good sense to choose something better. But we do have the liberty to choose something better. God says, I'm putting this out here. This grace has been revealed. Has been revealed. Did you see that? Has been revealed. That means there's nothing left to reveal. But it has been revealed unto all people. What has been? That saving grace has. You know what that means? That means that the same thing that is taught in the church here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, how a man is to be saved and how a man is to live a faithful life before God, is the same thing that will be taught all the way over in Australia, all the way over in Peru, or down in Peru, all the way anywhere on this earth that you can find the church established, the New Testament church established. You'll see the same thing being taught in each of those. Why? Because God's saving grace has been revealed to all. Did you know that there are things that you have to do in order to be saved? All right, are y'all asleep? Because y'all are just looking at me like, I don't even know the words you're saying. You know there are things you have to do, right? Sure. Did you know those things are the exact same things Paul had to do? The things haven't changed from the first century. The things God would expect from man hasn't changed from the first century. The thing God would expect man to do in order to kneel in obedience to him, the things God would expect man to do in order to stand up and live a righteous life, they haven't changed. They have not changed since, well, they really haven't changed from Adam and Eve, have they? And when you and I look at chapter 2, verse 11, we see liberty, and we see the source of that liberty as the saving grace of, now notice this word, the saving grace of who? Of God. One of these days, I'm going to take some time and actually perhaps work on a translation myself. You can have one for free. And I'm going to change this particular verse to say this. The saving grace of the one and only living God, who is omnipotent over everything, is offered unto man. As we read, we go and say the saving grace of God's appeared to all of us. We just slide right by the fact that this three-letter word here holds the emphasis of everything of why our world exists. It is God. It's the saving grace of God. He's the source of the saving. He's the source of the grace. He's the source of me living. He's the source of me not living. He's the source of it all. And we read through those and we sort of skim through that and say, yeah, the grace of God covers it all. Whoa, we really have skimmed past a lot if we're skimming past the saving grace of God. Notice verse number 11 also. The liberty that's given there by that saving grace of God is not a license just to act however I want to. It doesn't just give me free rein to act like a complete, I don't want to say the word I want to say, but I do. It doesn't give me the license to act like a complete idiot out in front of the world because I'm a child of God. It doesn't give me license to change how I would act or change how God would have me act. It doesn't give me license to say what I want to say, live how I want to live. It gives me license to follow after God. The saving grace of God is still under effect for the faithful child of God, not for the one who takes advantage of the liberty given by that grace of God. So when you and I look at verse 11, we see the liberty of God. Look at verse number 12. You'll see the learning of God, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live sensibly, righteously, and reverently in this present world. It's interesting that he tells us this, that this saving grace of God is going to first teach us. You remember this morning how we explored the idea of God shutting that door? That particular sermon, if you have to dissect the assembly who's here, that kind of sermon is very uplifting for those who have and are obedient to God, have been and are obedient to God. And it's one of those that would make you think if you haven't been. Right? Are y'all with me still? Okay, good. This idea tonight teaching us in verse number 12 indicates that you can't just stop there. You cannot just stop at coming out of this pool of water and go into that room and toweling off. That's not where it ends, ladies and gentlemen. Brethren, that's not where it stops. You can't just say, well, I have punched my card right here, so God's obligated to me. No, the fact of the matter is God now, as the Father, expects you to live in with His Word like His child. Teaching us. And that's hard to do at times, isn't it? Who wants to give up everything they do in this life? Oh, nobody. So just raise your hand. All right. Who doesn't want to go to heaven? That's the rest of us. That's the rest of y'all, right? If I'm not willing to give up everything in this life, listen here, I'm not willing to go to heaven. What else in this life is what I can hold back and say, all right, God, I have this one thing that I've got to hold on to from the earth. I've got to have this. And can I make it into heaven that way? Teaching us to lay down all of the idols that we have. And we have them, don't we? What is it that I place before God? While it might not be the same type of idols that are in the first century that are literally little statues. Anything that I place before God in importance has become an idol. What am I willing to lay down? Even better, what am I willing not to lay down that I'm willing to hold on and trade eternity for? I'm willing to hold on to bad habits such as smoking or drinking. I'm willing to hold on to little things that we don't look at so badly, like little white lies. I'm willing to hold on to the idea that just because, I don't know, That God's going to save me just because. I'm willing to hold on to those things and hedge my bets on the fact that God will do it. I'm here to tell you tonight, He won't do it. You can't make it into heaven that way. And I can't either. We're going to have to change some things in order to be taught just the way Paul was. You remember, you obeyed that gospel just like Paul. You had to be taught just like Paul. That denying ungodliness and worldly lust. Why? Because those are the things we want to do. What is your, what we used to call a pet sin? You know what those are? What's your favorite one? What's the one that if God would say, all right, I'll give you a pass on one, you can pick it? Which one is it? Well, you probably know. It's probably in your mind right now, isn't it? Would you give that up? Would you be willing to stop doing that? Teaching us that denying worldly lusts, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live sensibly, uprightly, and reverently. Notice this, when you change, when you stop doing something, you're going to have to replace it with something else. How many of you have ever been on a diet? How many of you are not willing to say so? How many of you said, all right, I'm going on this diet and I'm just going to stop. I'm going to stop eating this thing or another or this other thing. You ever do that one? How long did that last? 12, 14 hours? So I don't know if you know this or not, but finer establishments around Hot Springs, like Walmart and convenience stores, sell something called twin snakes. Do y'all know what twin snakes are? They're a gummy candy, and they have a sour snake and a sweet snake attached to each other. Apparently it's sour. I never have tasted the sour side, but you eat them together. I do. I don't know how y'all do it. I got some twin snakes waiting on me when I get in the car Wednesday morning. I know that. I'm going to eat them at 8 a.m. Billy, would you be willing to give that up? I don't know. Twin snakes are pretty good. And you think, well, that's the silliest thing I ever heard. Well, it doesn't matter what you want to put in that blank. Everything that we can put within that blank to include those silly little twin snakes, all of those things pale in comparison to eternity. And I'm willing to give it all up for that. Teaching us to deny those things, to take those things out of our life, but in place of them add sensibility, uprightness, and reverentness, or living reverently. Can you do that? Well, I don't know. Those are pretty tough things to do. You can put in your notes right here, 1 John 5, verse number 3. Are you ready? So John writes by the inspiration of God, that God asks us to follow His commands, and His commands are not grievous. That's a fun word, grievous. How many of you used grievous this past week? You know what that means? That means His commands are not so outlandish that you and I cannot do those things. God is not asking the impossible, but what He is asking is the change. He's asking what's expected, not the impossible. Does He expect me to change? Yes. Does He expect you to change? Yes. That is only if you want to go to heaven. The change that He's asking is right here in this world right now. Take those worldly things out, add these godly things. The benefit that He's offering for those is eternity. Would you be willing to trade those things off? If you want to access God's grace and if you want to live like His child, you'll live underneath that liberty. You'll live underneath that learning. And look at the verses 13 and 14 here. You're going to be looking, if you're his child, looking for the blessed hope of the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. He gave himself for us that he might set us free from all sin and purify for himself a people belonging to him, zealous of good works. Look at this phrase, looking for the blessed hope and the glorious appearing of our great God, Jesus the Christ. What am I looking for as his child? The same thing the first century church was looking for. You remember when we were talking about 1 Thessalonians and how Paul would write them that letter to say, hey guys, it's all well and good that you guys are sort of camped out on the hill waiting for Jesus to come. But I kind of need y'all to come back down here and get back into regular life because he ain't coming just yet. You know, when they would read about it, they would think his coming is tomorrow. Is that how you look at it? When they say Jesus is coming back, you say, boy, I hope it's tomorrow. You know what? I hope Jesus comes back tonight. Why? I ain't got to wake up real early in the morning. If he comes back before PTP, I don't have to teach all those lessons. If he comes back before the next time we meet, well, then we don't meet here, do we? Would you rather meet here or in eternity? See, our minds are so focused on what's here, we forget about what's there. Well, I've got to do this. What if this doesn't happen? I need to go get this car looked at, and I need to do this thing. I need to live looking for the blessed hope and the glorious appearing of my Savior. Because whatever I have on my to-do list, when Jesus Christ pierces back through those clouds, the way he left, that to-do list is gone. I got nothing else to do. Looking for that glorious hope and that glorious appearing of our great God and Jesus the Christ. He gave himself for us that he might, notice this, set us free from all sin. This is a piggyback off of verse number 12. You know, he was speaking there in verse number 12 of all those things that we're willing to give up and all those things that we're willing to replace it of. He's willing to forgive every single sin that we're willing to lay down. Now, which one of those sins do you want to carry with you into eternity? Hey, friends, lay them down. Stop carrying those things around with you. Lay those things down. God offers complete freedom from sin. That is, no guilt, no condemnation associated with that. That's a good thing, right? Shake your head this way. That's a good thing. He also offers the idea of no more shame to deal with that. Because that's done and over with. You want complete freedom? Give it to God. Look at this. That he might set us free from all sin and purify for himself a people belonging only to him. That complete freedom, however, according to verse 14, is only offered for one people. Only offered for one group of people. And you say, that's right, preacher, you're talking about the church. No, I'm not. I'm talking about the faithful in the church. Now look at that idea. Are you telling me, preacher, that there could be people who are unfaithful? Look right here. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I'm telling you there are people that are heating the pew right now that are unfaithful. Am I wrong? Are there people who are here and who should be here who live very differently outside of those doors than they do inside of the doors? Should geography matter? Or should eternity matter? Brethren, I believe if Paul is writing in 2024 and he's writing this letter to us here at 70 West, he finishes this particular phrase by saying, guys, what are we doing? What are we doing? Are we just assembling through the time and forgetting about the grace of God and forgetting about all that liberty, all that learning and all that looking, and we're content with simply keeping house and playing church? Is that where we are? Or do we want to find ourselves as a faithful group of people who help each other into heaven? I want to be the second one. How about you? What I don't want to be is the first group. I don't want to be the group who is taking for granted the gifts of God in salvation in order to just say, well, we met at the right times in the right places. I want to end my life, begin eternity, however that works out. I want to stand before God Himself to have Him say these words: you did all right. You know who He's not? He's not going to compare me to Jesus as Jesus preached. He's not going to compare me to Paul as Paul preached. He's not going to compare me to Michael. He's going to look at me and say, you either did what you were supposed to or you didn't do. And it's all going to be on the shoulders of this guy right here. And one day you stand before that same God and He's going to make that same pronouncement on you. Now, you right now have a pivotal question to answer. This is a question of eternity. And I need you to be just as serious as you absolutely can be in these next series of questions. Do you like where you are? By that I mean, are you faithful to God? Not that you show up from time to time and not if for this event or that event, I make sure I'm here. Are you faithful to God 168 hours a week? Is this your life? Brethren, listen to what I say. If it's not your life, it'll be your death. Is this your life? Are you faithful to God? If the answer is no, then you need to come home. You need to be faithful to Him. You need to live that life that is faithful to Him. And you need to do that for yourself. You need to secure your eternity for yourself. And then reach out to others. What do you need to do? Make the decision right now while we stand and sing.
Jesus is calling me home, calling